International relations expert Robert Patman from Otago University. He's with us this morning. Like Hayley mentioned, there has been some tension between Tillerson and Trump for a while now, but for Tillerson to learn about this off Twitter seems extraordinary.
Good morning, Jack. Yes, it's very much in Mr. Trump's style, of course. I think one of the things that brought this to a head, actually, was the controversy now developing between the UK and Russia. As the previous speaker said, there's no secret that Tillerson and Mr. Trump didn't see eye to eye on Iran. They didn't see eye to eye on Korea. And also, Mr. Tillerson had called, apparently, the president a moron, which is not likely to endear him to a person who's very sensitive. But the crucial issue is that Mr. Tillerson was the first member of the administration to quite unequivocally say that Russia was involved in the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia.
Yeah.
And Mr. Trump remained silent on that. His press spokesperson, Ms. Saunders, also said it was an appalling act but wouldn't attribute responsibility to Russia.
Yeah, she went to kind of extreme lengths to try and avoid using the word Russia yesterday. I'm sure that the Trump administration is looking for no links whatsoever with the word Russia for the time being. As Hayley mentions, we'll continue to monitor developments on that front. We wanted to talk to you specifically about Russia and Theresa May's movements overnight. What can the UK actually do to retaliate if indeed Vladimir Putin and Russia do not meet Theresa May's deadline?
Well, I think there's several options being pondered, and Britain, against the backdrop of the killing of a previous former Russian intelligence official, Alexander Litvenko, who was killed by radioactive polonium after drinking a cup of tea in London, and the feeling is in London that the British were too weak in response. They simply carried out a series of diplomatic expulsions. They're now looking at freezing assets belonging to wealthy Russians connected to the Putin regime. Bill Browder, for example, an American commentator, said this is the most effective way. Hurt the Putin regime where it will really count. The second possibility is putting limits on Russian banks in London. And the third is boycotting the World Cup. Now, I think it's not, it could be possible that England would boycott the World Cup, the 2018 World Cup in Russia, but I don't think many other countries will follow suit.
No, and I don't think the English football fans would be terribly happy with Theresa May if that was indeed the case. But that first option you mentioned, trying to put some sort of sanctions on those who are close to Vladimir Putin's administration, seems like the strongest option at this stage. Do you mean oligarchs who have big property investments in
oligarchs.
London?
A lot of Mr. Putin's inner circle have some of them. Their children are being educated in London and in private schools. Many of them have very nice properties. And I think the feeling is that they've got to signal to the Putin regime, this has got to stop. Now, Mr. Putin and Mr. Lavrov, his foreign minister, of course, deny all responsibility. But it's not something they readily admit if they did do it.
Is there any doubt Russia was responsible?
Well, the nerve agent concerned, Novichok, is, according to all the analysis we can get, something that the Russians have had since about the 1980s. It's absolutely lethal, very dangerous. And I think what's really incensed the British government is the feeling that not only have Russian people been or former Russian people been put at risk, possibly death, but also a number of British people, 21 people, have been contaminated in some way. And this seems to be despite warnings. There's been a number of warnings. Mrs. May gave Mr. Putin a warning 3 months ago in Parliament. This sort of behaviour's got to stop. It seems to go on continuously. Of course, the British government must bear some responsibility for the fact that it's been at loggerheads with its EU partners, which may incentivise this sort of behaviour.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch over the next 24 hours or so. Thank you so much for your time. As always, Professor Robert Patman from Otago University.